So the 1070 Ti was recently released, and I was just thinking to myself, okay, doesn't this kind of cannibalize the entire lineup of the nvidia GPUs, at least for the latest generation? But I guess it just doesn't really have to make too much sense. It's not in a far price margin either. It's in about $100 price difference between the 1080 and the 1070. But what I'm here to bring to you today is how far can you push your 1070? Because recently I got a 4K monitor and I was like, oh, this thing is so sweet, but I only have a 1070, so I'm not going to be able to game at 4K. But I tried it and I was proved wrong. So this is going to be quite exciting, because the point of this video is that you don't need to run your games at ultra settings, because the ultra settings aren't necessarily the best settings. High quality detail is almost next to ultra settings, but the visual difference is not that much, is what I'm trying to say. So what we're going to test here today is what looks good. We're going to test the experience with the GTX 1070 with a couple of different games at 4K resolution, full-blown 4K resolution, and we're going to go for the 60 FPS frame rate. So whether or not the GTX 1070 is going to hold up, we shall see. But I've been testing it with a couple of games so far, and it's held up pretty nicely. And we're not just going to be testing, like, I don't know, World of Tanks or World of Warships or War Thunder. It's going to be games that are graphic intensive and also CPU intensive at the same time. So in my rig right now, I'm running a 4790K with 32 gigs of DDR3 RAM and the GTX 1070, more specifically the MSI GamingX GTX 1070. So we're going to see how far we're going to push this thing, and I'm not even overclocking the 1070. And we're going to see what kind of performance we're going to get. So I want to welcome you guys back to the channel. My name is JD, and if you're new here, consider subscribing if you want to see more content like this. So let's move on into the gaming. Just got to move my mic and my camera because I want to be fancy. I have Doom up here first. This is going to be the first game we're going to tout. And I also have Riva Tuner up here, and I have it enlarged like a lot. What we're going to be mainly looking at is what our frame time is, to see what the consistency of the frame times are, so that's going to be important, and what our frame rate is going to be. So usually it runs around the 17 to 18 millisecond mark, and we're running constantly around 60 FPS, which is pretty awesome. So let's just test out the gaming experience here and see what kind of frame we're looking at. So right now, when I explode this orb, there's going to be a lot of things to render, and it's going to be a lot more tasks than it would be just walking around here. So that's what my main goal is here with tasking the GPU and testing the experience. And quickly, I'm just going to run through what settings I have on right now. There's no VSync, there's no anti-aliasing. We also have ultra settings on everything. So light quality, decal quality is ultra, decal filtering is 16 times, visual texturing is nightmare, and ultra and ultra and ultra. Yeah. Okay, so that's what the settings are at right now. So we can always tweak those settings to be a little bit further down, and we can still get great visual performance and also great FPS performance. So let's get into the gaming experience here. Boom, okay. Frame rates are still staying around 20 milliseconds. The frame time is mainly staying within the same 10 millisecond range. So it's not too wavy, which is pretty awesome. What you don't want to see is a whole bunch of up and down, up and down, up and down, like a Richter scale if there was an earthquake going off. That would look really bad. We're doing 60 frames like no problem, occasionally dipping into the low 50s, but that's honestly not a problem. Screen tearing is not too bad either. I mean, it's present, don't get me wrong, but you don't need to run vertical sync to have a good experience with playing video games. So the GTX 1070 right now is holding up very well. We're looking at frame rates of around 50 to 60 to 70 FPS, probably averaging around 60 FPS flat. Oh, and it's also worth mentioning that we are running this in Vulkan. This is not OpenGL. Okay, so let's switch some gears. Let's exit out to the desktop, and let's load up another game by the name of Grand Theft Auto 5. Okay, so like I said before, frame times. Whether it's 20 millisecond frame times, 15 millisecond frame times, 25 millisecond frame times, as long as they're consistent, they're you know, mostly consistent, then it's gonna look great. You can see right now, this, you might be saying, wow, that looks so inconsistent. Well, the thing is, you don't want to see up here, down here, up here, down here, up here, down here. See, like, if you saw a bunch of drops like that, that's only there because the game is loading in right now. But if you saw a bunch of those, that would be bad. You can see a little wave and everything, but if you saw these giant spikes consistently, that would mean a very inconsistent frame time, which would mean a lot of choppiness, regardless of the FPS performance that you're getting right now. So right now we're getting about 38 frames, 39 frames, 40. Let's just look up what my settings are at currently. May have been tweaking with them. MSIA is on, so we just want to turn that off. FXAA is on, so we're going to turn that off. VSync is on, so we're going to turn that off as well. So that's going to chew up a lot of performance, but it's not going to really, I mean, you can see there's pretty bad screen tearing right now. Okay, I might have to put on, yeah, the screen tearing is pretty bad. So you know what, I'm gonna turn on VSync for giggles. I think this game ran okay. Some games run okay with VSync on. Some are a little bit more demanding and will get really choppy. That didn't really make much of a difference now, did it? Oh well. Now this monitor does have FreeSync, it does not have G-Sync, so otherwise I would be using that and testing that out, but I don't have money for a G-Sync monitor, to be honest with you. There's some pretty decent screen tearing, but it's not going to take away from the overall experience of the game, in my opinion. That's honestly up to you. Also, I'm sorry I'm using Cherry MX Blues on my keyboard. I'm sorry if they're quite clicky. But anyways, we're seeing FPS around 60 FPS right now. We're at 61, 60, 62. Pretty consistent, and we're constantly driving, so we're constantly rendering new objects. We have a frame time that's pretty tight. It's actually more tight than it was on Doom, and it's hovering around 15 milliseconds and not really dropping below that, and reaching a maximum of about 19. I don't think I've seen it peak up to 20 yet, but it's pretty tight. It feels like a lot tighter than it has been on than Doom. So, okay, so we just crashed. No sudden spikes in FPS drops or anything like that. So that's good. Maybe we need to blow up a few things just to see how that is, because, you know, whenever you blow up something. Okay, so we dropped about 52 FPS, and still it still bounces up, and it's still very fluid. So when you see a dip of about, I don't know, 5 to 7 frames, it's not that noticeable. Now, if you're dipping like 20 to 25 frames, yeah, that's going to be quite noticeable, and you're also probably going to see frame time differences as well. But for right here, it's actually not that bad. So the experience is really nice. Even with the screen tearing, for some reason on GTA, is a little bit more apparent than the other games that I've been testing with. So for some reason, I don't know what the problem is with that. Now we're gonna load up PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, some PUBG or PUBG, whatever you want to call it. Now some games are very well optimized and some are not. If you're trying to play Deus Ex Mankind Divided with a 1070 at 4K resolution, obviously that's not gonna work. But I feel like for the majority of games that are well optimized, you can get away with running high to almost ultra detail at 4K resolution with some screen tearing and some minimal dips in frame time and FPS, but still have a very good and enjoyable experience with fluid frame rate times. So yeah, that's the main point I'm trying to convey. But now let's open up PUBG and see what this is like. And this is another weird game because this is very CPU dependent as well. So it's going to be a mix between the CPU and the GPU. But anyways, the 4790K is still a beast in my opinion. Anti-aliasing is low, post-processing is low, shadows high, texture, effects, foliage, and view distance is all at ultra settings. Anti-aliasing and post-processing I feel like don't really add a whole lot to the visual experience. So really not sacrificing a lot to get a good visual experience while also getting smooth gameplay. Again, I'm probably going to be reiterating that and saying that a lot throughout this video, but that's just the main point I'm trying to convey here. Okay, so Spawn Island is already a great place to test what kind of frame rate and what kind of frame time you're going to get, because you have so many people around here and a lot of players all rendering into view. So we can see here we're about 56, 55 FPS, and it goes sometimes into the high 40s, but we can see we stayed about into the low 50s, mid 50s, and 60s as well. When we have a frame time that's averaging probably around 19 milliseconds, we get about 23 and dipping down to 17 at times, 28 milliseconds there. So we got a little bit of jankiness on the frame time right now, but we're gonna load into a match and see how that is, because this is a lot going on. I mean, look at these maniacs. There's fire, there's people dying and crawling on the ground. Good God. Alright, you know what? I think I'm gonna go right into that little village, because I just don't want to be bothered with. Yeah, I'm one of those people. I just don't want to be bothered with. Alright, we're at 60 frames pretty smoothly right here. Oh, there's a guy right next to me. Of course. Now that we're loaded in, we have textures loaded in, we have vehicles, we have houses. I think 40 FPS is still pretty good with this, especially at 4K resolution. This game is notorious for not running so hot. But I feel like as there's like nothing in this house. Oh, we got a backpack, but still. So we can see here by the graph, these are pretty steady times. Now if we go outside and we run around, this might be a little different. So let's test it. Let's run around with my clicky keyboard. I mean, it's a little wavy, but it's still pretty smooth. Yeah, that's pretty much what it is, and we're gonna move on to another game. All right, we're gonna load up Forza Horizon 3, which in my opinion is a pretty strenuous game on the GPU. Not simply because it's really hard to run, it just takes up a lot of VRAM, and I think you need at least 4 gigs minimum just to have this game run smoothly. Yeah, so we got full screen on, we got VSync on, motion blur, resolution of 4K, frame rate smoothing, and we also have ultra settings here. MSAA, and I'm going to turn off FXAA, and I'm going to leave anisotropic filtering. I don't know how to say that. I'm going to leave the filtering probably at 8 times. That doesn't hinder too much performance, I think, with this game. So we're just going to save those settings, and we're going to see how that does. So if you were seeing stuff like this, that's bad. Now if you see a constant trend and it waves up and down a little bit depending on how much is being rendered onto the screen, that's okay. That usually means it's pretty smooth. What you don't want is these jarring spikes up and down. The only reason you're seeing this right now is because it's a loading screen. Okay, frame times is going to be in the upper teens, probably the low 20s, just like the rest. Now let's see when we're actually moving. We're seeing about 58, 57. We're getting a lot of spikes in frame times. Now this game, whether it was at 4K or 1080, gives me a lot of frame time issues. For some reason, I just feel like this game isn't very well optimized for the PC. It's gotten better. It's gotten a lot better. But like when just occasionally you get these wacky frame times. The main driving factor here, haha, no pun intended. Oh, I love dry humor. Is that you can tweak these settings to work best for your situation. So even if I want to get even better performance out of this, say for instance when there's 4K monitors that go above a 60 Hz refresh rate, you can tweak the settings a little bit lower without sacrificing visual detail and get more performance. So right now we're just on an open airstrip and we're seeing constant frame times, a little bit of jaggedness in the frame times, but It's a solid 60 FPS. Now the VSync is limiting that 60 FPS. Whether we'd be getting more or not, I don't know. Now we could potentially be getting more. So if I can turn off VSync right here. Okay. Now we're seeing frame rates of like the mid 70s. As you can see here, there's a lot of up and down, up and down. But it's not consistent up and down, up and down. If it was consistent, it would be a pretty choppy experience. And right now, to my own eyes, it's not so much that. It's actually pretty smooth and enjoyable, and this game looks freaking awesome in 4K resolution, to be honest with you. For this game, you can leave the VSync on, and you're not going to get as much of a hindrance in performance like I was with GTA 5. So again, if we put on VSync, let's go over here, put on VSync, save and continue, go back. See all those spikes from before. They're now a little bit more spaced out. I'm trying to pay attention and drive at the same time. Don't do this, kids. It's a little bit more consistent, and those jumps and frame times and FPS aren't as pronounced as before. They're not as crazy as before, because before they were a lot higher. Now they're a lot closer to the median. So that's what I mean with playing with your settings. Each game is going to be different, so you can get the best settings possible. You can see we got more jumps over here. But overall, this is an enjoyable experience to me. Now, that was a pretty bad stutter right there, but I think that was on Forza's part, because that happens all the time, even at 1080p resolution. So those I kind of expect with this game, and that's why I don't really like to use it for benchmarking, because you still get pretty bad stuttering with this game. Okay, shall we load up Battlefield 1? Okay, so we're at 4K resolution, and right now we've got ultra settings with anti-aliasing off. I like how there's sparkles on the tank. At first I thought it was like gunshots like bouncing off, but I was like, nope, it's just a shiny tank. It's just sparkly. It's a fabulous tank. Okay, we're dipping about 38. We dipped about 38 frames when we had a big explosion going on. I might turn some of these settings down. Texture quality, we're gonna put it high. This game definitely requires more of the GPU than some of the other games, potentially, but this is another one of those games that utilizes all your cores and threads pretty well, and also relies on the GPU. So, oh, that's my own teammate. My bad. Okay, so we're getting pretty consistent frame times here. So this is an enjoyable gaming experience. And to be honest with you, we've seen very little difference in performance between ultra and high settings. So that just goes to show that they're relatively pretty close to each other, depending on the game. For this game, it seems like they're pretty close to each other, and everything looks super high detail, the same as ultra. So even at high settings, this is pretty nice. And again, the 1070 is gaming at 4K resolution pretty well, and this is a pretty demanding title in my opinion. It's well optimized, but it's still demanding. Okay, so yeah, Titanfall 2 didn't want to play in 4K resolution. Something with the game, you have to go into the config files and actually edit one of the config files and actually type in 4K resolution. It's weird. So I didn't want to bother with that. I felt like I already had enough games to kind of show you guys what kind of performance you can expect and how you can actually almost squeeze 60 FPS 4K gaming out of a 1070 at near ultra settings. I mean, you don't have to push the settings completely all the way to the maximum. You can actually get 4K 60 FPS with smooth frame times with just adjusting your settings that are optimized well for your GPU and also that are optimized well for the game, and also your CPU, depending if you're on the Ryzen platform or on the Intel platform. Based on those things, you're really looking for the optimal gaming experience for yourself. And like I said, ultra detail versus high detail is pretty hard to tell the difference between unless you're actually really looking for it. So you can fine tune those settings. You have a margin of which you can fine tune your visual settings to boost your gaming performance without actually sacrificing too much on the visual side. The fact that you can get that out of the GTX 1070 speaks volumes, and I'm using the MSI GTX 1070 GamingX. This is not a 1070 Ti, it's not a 1080, it's not a 1080 Ti. If you wanted to crank all the settings up all the way and be able to play any game almost at 4K 60 FPS, then yes, you would get a 1080 Ti, and even also be able to push further beyond 60 FPS with that when 4K 120 hertz monitors come out next year, I believe. So as of right now, you can get playable experience with a GTX 1070 and an enjoyable experience, and that's all that really matters. I mean, numbers are great, don't get me wrong, and benchmarking is essential to being able to compare to different types of products. But for this is simply for the sake of what kind of experience you're getting. If you're someone who's in the market looking for a gaming computer, you didn't buy the gaming computer because you just wanted the best numbers on the benchmark graphs. You're buying it because you want a good gaming experience. How can you save money in different areas so that you get an optimal gaming experience? So this kind of shows you where and how you can do that. The GTX 1070 is a good candidate for this very point that I'm trying to convey throughout this entire video, and I think it does a pretty good job at doing just that. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Let me know if you like this kind of video of what kind of performance you can squeeze out of hardware that's typically not really advertised or really speaking about, or talked about speaking about. I don't know if that's really a phrase, because you see people talk about 1080 Ti's if you just want to do 4K gaming, and the 1070 is more the 1440p resolution kind of card. You can do 1080 144 hertz with it, no problem, and 1440p, no problem. But if you want to see more videos where you want to see it push beyond its marketing material, beyond what people say it's actually capable of, let me know, because I enjoyed this and it was actually a surprise to me, and I just wanted to share this experience with you guys. So thank you all for watching. If you're new here, consider subscribing and checking out the rest of the channel. Hope you all enjoyed, and thank you for watching.